because it's not really 51 over 3. It's like the Shohei Ohtani deal that we talked about is really 46 million a year, not 70 million a year. And so they just did that big contract, Dylan Cease. Remember that contract he just signed with Toronto that we thought was 210 over 7? And then you learn about all the deferrals, and it's more like 26 million a year instead of what the number was, 210 over 7, which would have been 30 million a year. So it changed by 4 million a year. It changed $28 million sort of when you're calculating what it is for taxes for the Padres and for the Blue Jays, excuse me. And that's all the Mets did here. So they were thinking about other players on their team, who they were signing, and you called it the Edwin Diaz situation. You mean whether or not Edwin Diaz will agree to re-sign with the Mets as a free agent, or whether or not the Mets will even make him an offer?
No, I think the Mets are going to try to bring him back. You know, he's been a figure in the Mets bullpen for years now, and they need somebody in that closer role. But it all just depends on like what Edwin Diaz wants and what he feels like he should make. It's the same situation with Pete Alonso, right? Like we haven't really heard anything about an Edwin Diaz market. You know, what teams are interested. There hasn't really been anything trickling out there. But when you look at Pete Alonso, I saw reports recently that there are only 2 spots for him. You know, is it going to be with the Red Sox or is it going to be with the Mets? And it always felt like the market for Alonso should be bigger than what it actually seems like it is. So maybe there are surprise teams that come in there, but you know the Mets are in a situation where they need a lot. And we spoke about this the other day, where you know David Stearns was supposed to be this genius that came in, right? He was this wonder kid who can come in and fix the Mets because the Mets needed that president of baseball operations who would use analytics and use this and use that. Well, you know, most of the trades that he had at the deadline last year didn't work out, right? They went into the season with a starting pitching rotation that to fans, we were like, this is what we're rolling out with. You know, that Frankie Montes deal looked terrible on paper, and then it ended up, you know, being terrible. Senga was your ace, and he never really pitched like he was an ace. So there are a lot of holes in this Mets lineup. So I think getting a guy like Devin Williams is, you know, it's that feels good. Like it feels good knowing that, okay, you know, a prized sort of free agent wants to come here, wants to play here, even if you're going to pay him a little over, you know, what market might be.
I love you, man. A prize free agent wants to play in New York if you're going to give him a little more than what the market would bear.
Okay.
That's how you can get to Miami, Milwaukee. You can go to any team if you get more than what the market can bear. And Pete Alonso's agent is Scott Boras. So you're getting a lot of leaks about teams that are interested, but he's not going to sign Alonso unless someone would hit the bid. And the rumors are Alonso's asking for a number of years and an amount of money per year that is unrealistic, which sounds familiar to what happened last year. Would it surprise you if the Mets were able to get him back on a pillow deal, you know, another 2 to 3 year deal with more opt-outs after every year? Or you think that Pete Alonso will be this year's Matt Chapman or Blake Snell, where they have the Boris pillow deal, but then they got the long-term deal in year 2? That's what you assume will be with Alonso?
Yeah, I just don't see the Mets doing another pillow deal. I don't think that they want to do this again, like play this game again, where it's like, are we going to sign him after the season? Are we not going to sign him? Is he going to leave? Is he not going to leave? Like, I feel like it at some point that's got to be annoying, especially if it's with the same player. You know, you want to know if your first base DH is solidified. You know, you don't want to play, you know, the game that you had, you know, recommended where it's like being a free agent every year. I don't think you want to do that.
Yeah, I disagree. I think that for a team, why go long term and why suffer the pain? Alonso is likely still able to help your team next year. If you had to choose someone to play first base for your team in 3 years, I wouldn't choose Pete Alonso, but next year I would. So if you can have the opportunity to get a 1-year deal with him with another opt out after a year, I would strongly consider it.
But why wouldn't you? But why wouldn't you think Alonso could be a first baseman in 3 years? He's 30 years old, but he's 30 years old. Like, you're making him seem like he's like a 35-year-old, you know, on the wrong side of his 30s, you know, and he's aging out of the position. It doesn't feel like that to me. Like, it still feels as though he plays a great first base, and then you can transition him into the DH role. That's a pretty important thing, in your lineup, and to have a bat like Alonso there, makes sense to have a bat like that in your lineup.
So if the Mets, who didn't make the playoffs last year, and I won't belabor this point, but you bring Diaz back, you bring Alonso back, and you add Devin Williams, maybe something more at the fringe. I don't know. I just think that you try to be different because what you didn't work. So doing it again doesn't make sense to me, but we'll see what Boris does with Alonso. But the Mets didn't waste time. And having Devin Williams sign, what interested me about that number is that when you're above a player in the free agent rankings or in the market, there is an argument to be made to go first, and there's an argument to be made to go second. If Devin Williams had signed a deal for under, call it $15 million a year, then the Diaz's of the world, the top of the reliever market, would be disappointed because they would view that as been a drag to what they would get because they're going to slot in above Devin Williams. Now that Devin Williams is in at that number, forget that it's the Mets. It makes someone like Suarez or Diaz, it makes them say, wait a minute, we're going to hold out for that 100 over 5 because that makes sense where we should be if Williams is getting 51 over 3. I think the Mets made it harder for themselves to get Diaz back, not easier, by signing Williams.